All right. Number 2 on that same page, you have a tall pea plant crossed with a recessive dwarf pea plant. You don't know what the genotype of the tall plant is, because if it's big T, it'll be tall, but also if it's big T, little t, it will be tall. But we always know the genotype of a recessive individual. So the recessive is going to be little t, and notice that when I draw my T's, I really make sure I can tell the difference between a capital T and a little t. I go crazy with that because that'll be confusing otherwise. Okay, go ahead and go downstairs and play. Okay. Thank you, Isabel. Alright, so if we have, for part A, if the other plant was big T, then that's super easy because that can only have little, that can only have big, so all of the offspring have to be big T, little t. However, for part B, if the other plant was big T, little t, then you can do a Punnett square here, and in a minute we're going to move away from doing Punnett squares because you should be able to do this kind of stuff in your head without even writing it down. But we'll get there. Alright, so we'll put one plant here. This plant can only make little t's, and this plant can make big T, little t. Because this is duplicated right here, I don't even need to pay attention to what's going on down there. I don't even need to fill it in. So I've got big T, little t, and little t, little t. So that means there is a 50% chance of tall, 50% chance of dwarf for that particular question. Okay? Or you can write 1 to 1 for the ratio. 1 big T, little t to 1 little t would be the genotypic ratio. 1 tall to 1 dwarf would be the phenotypic ratio. Alright? Okay, next we'll do number 3. Number 3, I'm going to get you started, and then I want you to pause the video and work by yourself, and then after people are about ready to see the answers, then start it again. So, we've got, for number 3, homozygous, purple, and tall, so that's all dominant, and then we have homozygous, white, and dwarf, which is all recessive. So, we'll write... We always want to write as much information as possible. And again, I'm really accentuating the difference between capital and lowercase letters here, because if you don't do something different, like I add the little curly thing there on these so that I know those are my lowercase letters, because otherwise it's going to get confusing for you. So, phenotype of your F1s. Remember, this is our P's here. Our F1s are the offspring created there. Okay, so what kind of eggs can you make here? You want to have one of each gene. This is together and this is together. That's together and that's together. So you'll get one from each of those. Since these are homozygous, it's really simple because you're going to get one big T and one big P, one little t and one little p. One of each. Because during mitosis, which I know we haven't studied that yet, or rather during meiosis, when you form the eggs and sperm, you get one of each chromosome from each pair of chromosomes. So if this gene is on chromosome 1, this is also on chromosome 1, but on the other one. Remember how there's 2 of each? So you don't know which one you would get. But since they're both the same, in this case, it doesn't matter. Alright, so our F1 is going to be big, little t's, big P, little p. You always partner up the same letters together. So I wouldn't write TP, TP. You partner them up because these are a homologous pair right here, and that's a homologous pair right there. For instance, maybe that would be found on one chromosome 2, the other chromosome 2, chromosome 7, and the other chromosome 7. Just making those up. Alright, so that's, A then is going to be tall, purple for your F1 because that's dominant, so that's going to be tall, and that's going to be purple. And then the genotype is shown there as well. Letter C, what 4 types of gametes are formed if we cross these? That's a little trickier to figure out what the gametes are going to be because it's not 2 of the same thing. There's big T and there's little t, so that's a little bit harder to do. So, what we're going to use is a method that you guys have used in math class before, and this is called FOIL. Do y'all remember that? First, outer, inner, last. So to figure out the possible gametes, if I go first, That's going to be big T and big P. And then outer is going to be big T and little p. Inner is going to be little t and a big P. And last is going to be little t, little p. Even though that's super easy, this is the #1 thing that people mess up on. Your gametes, like each one of these would be an egg or a sperm if you're talking about males. Your gametes need to have one thing from each chromosome. Never will you have 2 T's and no P's. That would mean that you got both of chromosome 2 and you didn't get any of chromosome 7. So then you'd be messed up. So you have to get one from each pair. The question is, which from each pair are you going to get? And it's all random, so the probability of each of these is going to be 1/4 because there's 4 different things to choose from. Okay? So if you need to go back through that again, you guys can rewind and watch it again because this is really important. Okay? Now, since you're crossing this individual with someone with the same genotype, then the gametes for that other parent are going to be just the same as these. Okay? So when you write it on your big giant Punnett square, that's this huge one, okay, then you're going to list these out as 2 things: big T, big P, big T, little p, big, oh, I did that backwards, eraser, little t, big P, little t, little p. Okay? So again, make it really obvious whether something is a big or a little letter. Along the other side, you'll have the same thing again, since both parents have the same: big T, big P, big T, little p, big P, little t, little p. Okay? Why am I making 2 things instead of the easy problems where you had a 4 box and it went big B, little b, big B, little b? Because this is only looking at one trait at a time, like blue eyes, brown eyes, eye color. This is looking at 2 traits at a time, so you have to have an allele for each of the traits. One allele is for height, the other allele is for color. So there has to be 2 of them. So your genotype in a 2-trait cross ultimately will have 4 alleles because you have the pair for height and then you have the pair for color. All right? Okay, so then you just fill these in. Big T, remember to pair up the same letters. Big T, big T, big P, big P. All right, so go ahead and fill the rest of that in. And I'm going to pause this, and so you guys hit, well, actually, I'm not going to do that. You guys just pause the video. When you're finished with this, I'm assuming now you're finished, I'm going to erase real quick. I'm not filling in this whole thing, but what you should be able to do is count how many of each one of these things you have. And there's a whole bunch to choose from. Remember, this was our original cross, and then we crossed these. So for our F2s, we don't generally determine a genotypic ratio because there's so many different genotypes. There are, however, only going to be 4 phenotypes, and that we will count. So you should, if you count them all, and it helps to shade in the boxes, like maybe do really light stripes going that way for all of them that are tall and purple. And then the ones that are, and so that's 1, tall, purple. If they're tall and white, maybe you could put like polka dots in those boxes. Really light, so you can still see what's in there, but it helps you at the end because if you have a box that you didn't do, then you know you messed up. Okay, then we're going to have dwarf and purple. And so you can do like some other kind of pattern inside those boxes. And last, you're going to have dwarf and white, and you count them all up. How many total boxes do you have in this picture? There are 16. So when you count these up, if you add them together, you should come up with 16. If you don't, again, that means you messed up somewhere. It's really easy to make errors in these boxes. Okay, so tall purple, you should have had 9. tall white 3, dwarf purple 3, dwarf white 1. And that does add up to 16. So we would say you have a 9:3 to 3:1 ratio, which you might write like this. Okay? All right. Very good. So that gets us through letter E. Letter F, you're comparing just the ratio of tall to dwarf. So if we have 9 plus 3 is 12 talls, and then dwarfs 3 plus 1 is 4, so that's 12 to 4, or a 3:1 ratio for just looking at height. If you just look at color, you have 9 purples and 3 purples, so again that's 12, and then you have 3 whites and 1 white, so again that's 4, so you have a 3:1 ratio with that. This is why we're not going to have to do all these Punnett squares anymore, because the big giant ones anyway, because if you can do the little small ones in your head, then we'll use multiplication to figure out all these numbers and not have to draw these big giant crazy things. Isabel, please don't do that. Okay, so so we have 3:1 and 3:1. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause. Hit the red button, please.
Okay.